Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto bidding a warm welcome back to our listeners for another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. So I have a really interesting and exciting special guest today. His name is Alan Nance, who is pioneering the art and science of experience at CitrusCollab, where he is co-founder and managing partner. Alan has been using the science of experience to ignite growth and performance in organizations. And I'm very excited to talk about this with him today because experience is a topic that is really driving technology and business decisions at an increasing rate. Alan, thanks for taking the time to join us. Tell our listeners about you and how you ended up working on the science of experience before we dive deep into the subject matter.
So I've been around for a long time, as you can see, harrowed around the edges. But the last 14, 15 years, I've been working on large transformation projects at a bank, ING, at Philips, which is more in healthcare and lighting, and also at Barclays, which is obviously another financial institution. And I've learned a lot as I've gone through those iterations, but I did start to get a little jaded about the 3-year-long transformation programs. Insert miracle here, find a framework, push it out. We seem to be spending a lot of money without having the right results. So I started to think about what can we do faster? How can we move this thing along? And as I was going through that, one of the things that struck me was the need to focus on the employee or on the ultimate customer. Right. And what is the experience that this transformation is going to bring to them? And so oftentimes we find people enamored with, it's DevOps, it's Agile, it's IT for IT, and we start talking about how we're going to digitize things. But what we forget is why and what's the purpose of this at the end. What do we really want to do that's going to make our employees or our customers like us better so they continue to engage with us and allow us to take more of their share of wallet? And so I got into the experience conversation. And as I got into the experience conversation, you saw two different focus areas. One, which is very, very scientific, which went all about big data and all about looking at the trends and things that we can see in big data. And the other, which was much more touchy-feely. It's all about how people are hugged and nurtured. And I felt that there had to be a better place in between those two things that would help us. So that's how I got into the art and science of experience. I believe ultimately that is now the biggest driver for organizational success. And so we started the collab in March, and since then I've learned a lot. But I'm really, really excited about how the industry is going to change.
So I remember when we had our pre-conversation preparing for this, I asked you, tell me about the genesis of why experience is becoming such an unstoppable trend, and you shared some really interesting perspective on that. Do you remember? It was about the Pope and all that. Exactly. And not to bring religion into it, but you had a real interesting story about that.
Well, so we use two contrasting photos in our training course, and I use it on stage as well. Basically, the first one is in 2005 with the inauguration of Benedictus. And there's a picture of everybody in St. Peter's Square adoringly waiting for the Pope to come out onto the balcony. And everybody's waiting for that moment. And anybody who's been to St. Peter's knows it's a very exciting, historic place. And then we fast forward to 2013 and we see Franciscus. The same picture, same place. The difference is in 2013, everybody is filming it. Everybody's got an iPhone, a tablet.
I should film this now.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and what's happening there is not just that people are filming it, but they're co-creating. They're doing their own voiceover for the event. They're telling people, this is what I'm seeing. They're choosing, what they wish to film, and they're uploading it to social media. And you see this sea of interpretation going on. These are not people that have come just to consume. They're also co-creating. And I think that those two pictures are representative of what's happening in our large organizations as well. People are no longer end users. They don't see themselves in one of those green 3270 screens that we grew up with. They are co-creating stuff for the organization they work for. And so they need to get that work done, and they want to be informed about how that's going to happen a little bit. They want to have choices in what works for them. And so the experience now has been sort of passed on from the owners of the data that's being downloaded to the people that are co-creating that data. And I think that's a very fundamental shift, because at the end of the day, it means that people now have a choice based on the experience we give them. They have a choice to enjoy working with us, to put up with us, or to just leave us in the dust. And they're doing that in increasing numbers, whether we're looking at employees or whether we're looking at customers.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. It's choice, which is the way technology has evolved and giving people en masse the ability to choose, like this, customers, right? One flick of a second and they can just change. So that's definitely driving experience. I shared a video and you saw it, and it was a video. It was brilliant the way this data guy, and I'll post it somehow with this video because it was fascinating. It took me back to the days of AOL, when AOL started up, right? And that was the game in town. There was Lycos and Excite and some of the other search engines. And this video shows the growth of users. It's using a bar, but it's live. So as the users are growing, the bar is growing. And so you see AOL growing crazy, right? Because they really got that game back then. But what was the experience with AOL? For many of folks that weren't really using the internet then, is you had to dial, get a dial tone, have a connection, and hear the static before it connected. It was probably a 3 to 4 minute average wait time between the moment you actually started doing what you needed to do to get on the internet and you actually got on the internet. And then you look at the changes today. Google is the number one. And you have Facebook, and you see over time, but it's very fast, how that changes. And to me, the number one reason that explains why those companies cease to exist, basically, and you have the dominance of the ones that dominate today, is what? Is experience. Is the experience that they give to their customers. So that's why I'm very excited we're talking about experience today. Now, when you talk about experience, the subject then goes to XLAs, right? Can you give a little bit of an intro about that?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to say about the XLA. But first of all, could I just come back a little bit about your just what you were talking about market leadership. And one of the things that was recently published, and I'm talking about very recently, last month, there was a report that came out from MIT Sloan Management Review. And it talked about the decay rate for top performers. So how long does it take before you start to lose your market leading position? And one of the things that they found is in the 80s, for instance, the average decay rate was about 15% a year. So if you were the number one and you were not living up to your brand promise or the expectations, you would decline about 15% a year. The decay rate, as measured in the year 2013, was almost 100%. So you could lose your market position and indeed your whole position within 1 to 2 years. And the only companies that are escaping gravity, and that's why I just wanted to bring it up, Pedro, is only 17% of the 22,000 organizations that they studied managed to escape gravity. And they were including Apple, Google, and Amazon.
Yeah, and it's all about the experience.
5%, exactly.
Yeah, and the central thing is the experience. You know, what is your experience when you're doing a search? What is your experience when you're interacting in this social media platform with a device? That's really what drives it.
And not just in 2018, but also in 2019, also in 2020, because the goalposts keep moving. So this isn't like, let's let a climb to the top. It's a climb to the top of an ever-growing mountain.
That's right. That's right. So let's get to XLAs. What are they? How do they differ from SLAs? And get a little bit into that.
So, you know, when we started out, or when I started out in the 90s, looking at things like ITSM and ITIL and COBIT and things like that, the challenge that we had as executives was to get control over a sprawling landscape of technology. We had client-server technology erupting, and it was erupting everywhere, and there were new applications. And what we found was we didn't have the right processes in place to manage that. So we came up with things like ITIL to give us control, to talk about what is the configuration management database, how does it work, who owns the configuration items, and especially when we want to outsource, what's the performance that we're kind of looking for. And in that world, SLAs and KPIs make a lot of sense. In the same way as we're now talking about experience, SLAs have little or nothing to do with experience. You know, we've had a number of investigations and research that shows us today that less than 2% of all performance indicators in any industry have anything to do with the experience of customers or employees.
They're very inward focused.
Very inward focused. And in fact, 87% of the IT executives that have been polled through the ITSM Academy said that service agreements are internally focused. They're not about the customer, the employee, or the experience. And less than 3% of IT executives are happy with their service agreements today. And
Wow.
think about all the money that we've spent on education, process, tooling. And today we are barely, the average satisfaction with IT essentially has not moved in 10 years.
Now that's a titanic shift that has to take place. You're talking about 30, 40 years of conditioned minds of, you know, doing KPI work and metrics that are very operationally, internally focused. So you're at the vanguard of this. You talk to executives, you talk to IT folks, process owners. What is your experience in those that have made a transition from having that internal focus to not forgetting about the internal focus, because you can't do that, but adding on and incorporating a focus and an attention on the experience of the user?
Let me first of all say that XLAs do not replace SLAs, they sit on top of them. So we still need SLAs to run our business. And the way I'd explain that is if you go into a restaurant, unlike IT, we are one of the few areas of commerce where you have to sign a contract with us before we do anything. Right? You don't say that we don't give you service. You go into a restaurant, people will be nice to you. They'll sit you down. There's a sort of protocol about how long you're going to wait before you get your first drink, or somebody's going to come across, protocols about how people introduce themselves. Those are all part of the SLA structure, and they're all still very, very important as we go forward. But what we do on top of that is we say, well, what really matters to people? And what matters to people is the ambience, is the way they feel about the service and the products and the food that you give them. So what XLAs essentially do is they bridge the gap between the technology and the SLAs that we need to manage technology with what matters to the employee or what matters to the business in terms of outcomes. But the XLAs still sit on top of a structure of SLAs.
Right. So what, I've been doing some reading in the literature of experience and all that, and I see very clearly a distinction made between contracts and commitments.
Yes.
Can you speak to that? Because I don't really get that.
Well, so an SLA, it has a lot of contractual elements to it.
Yeah.
It tends to say you're going to do this within a period of time and you're going to have this result. And if you don't, then all of these things are going to happen, penalties or whatever.
Yeah.
So it really feels like a contract. Whereas an XLA is a commitment. It's a commitment to the experience that you're going to get. I think Disney's probably one of the best in the world at this. When you go to Disney, you don't want to know who's in the Winnie the Pooh suit or the Mickey Mouse suit. But Disney promises you and your family an amazing experience and that you're going to love it. Not an SLA in sight. But behind that, there's tons and tons of SLAs. So XLA is really a commitment between parties where one party promises the other about how they're going to make them feel after using their product, service, or interacting with their people. And I'll give you one example. I was talking to people at an airport about their baggage system. And there are lots of SLAs and contracts between the baggage handlers and the airlines and the people that provide the equipment. But what's the XLA? The XLA for me are things like, if you make your connecting flight, so will your baggage.
Okay.
Now, obviously, to make that work, you can have SLAs under it. I'm just taking something that everybody can relate to. There are more complicated XLAs as you can imagine.
Yep.
So I think that's what we're looking at here, is getting people to understand how people feel about the product, the service, and the interaction, and then benchmarking that, creating or designing the experience that they will value, enjoy, to make them repeat customers, to give you their share of wallet, and then to underpin that with service level agreements on how we're actually going to deliver on that.
Yeah, that's excellent. We work a lot with clients and helping them understand the relationship between leading and lagging indicators. And so we build what's called these KPI chains. So I can really see, and that's somewhat of a new concept because the tools that are becoming available allow that. Right. Versus in the past, all we've had access was to reporting tools that were very flat, unidimensional. And you could just, get lists and counts of things, but you really couldn't in dashboards and trend lines show the effect of these leading indicators and lagging. And most of the time what we measured was lagging. So you measured kind of like what had already happened, but what was being done to cause that result had already been done. And so I can see how, now that we have these tools to be able to connect what causes the result is to really work backwards. What is the result that we want? And trace the things that have to happen and that need to be measured to deliver the result. And we haven't yet really done a whole lot in experience level agreements and in tying KPI indicators to experience. We do it to business goals, which is the outcome sought for in a business environment. And
I see that a lot. And so there's another concept that we've been working on that comes from a colleague of mine, Bill Barrett, that we've tended to be looking at a snapshot. In the old days, it was the snapshot. It was the outage. It was the incident. And then over time, we've got better at having moments in time. So we'd have multiple surveys to a user community, or we'd have multiple monitoring points. Where we need to get to, and you're absolutely right, the technology is helping us more and more to do that, is what we call moments in motion, which is almost like the difference between having a Polaroid and having a film. So the film gives us this thing of what's happening, and you can see how people are becoming more frustrated, or you can see how there's a buildup of things that look unrelated that's causing something. And the further back that you can do that, the more chance you have of predicting, correcting, and mitigating or preventing altogether something that's going to affect the experience from occurring.
Yeah, I remember. Tell us a little bit about an illustration of that, because you shared with me how, all these recordings that we do of customer service calls. Right. Remember we talked a little bit about that, and how the truth is that not more than a small percentage of those things actually get listened to.
Well, that amazes me.
Impossible.
If I look at how unhappy, how frustrated executives are with experience, and I can tell you that there was a recent study done by Harvard Business Review, And 84% of executives found that the experience was vital to the success of the organization. And yes, less than 30% felt they had the organization, the tools to create and manage experience. So that's definitely part of it. Now, on the one hand, I get that frustration. I've been there. I've done jobs where I've been, battered at all sides because my KPIs were green, but everybody's sentiment was red. So it was one of those watermelon environments. But then you go and take a step back, exactly as you say, Pedro. We are recording a lot of our service desk conversations. And one of my colleagues invented that famous saying, your call will be monitored for quality purposes. But the truth is, it's not. And as you said, less than 1% of any call recorded, whether it's a call center or a service desk, are ever listened to at all.
Yeah.
What we use them for is compliance and performance management of the service desk itself. So we use it to say, did somebody really say something that wasn't appropriate? That's one side of it. And on the other side of it is, how can we improve our call resolution? How can we reduce our costs? But the truth of it is that you are getting, if you're a large enterprise, 10, 15, 20,000 calls a day from your customers telling you what you need to fix and what you need to be doing. Yeah. And I think it is mind-boggling that that information that we're already investing in is not being used to design those systems or validate those systems or determine priorities. I think that is stunning, absolutely stunning.
But can you share the very cool and groundbreaking, innovative way that that data in some cases, your clients and other places, is being used to actually read sentiment and to get richer insight?
Well, I would say that we're trying to get sentiment from all places, right? So the first place that we'd love to get it is all the conversations when the customer doesn't think they're talking to you. So those are all the social media channels where people are not necessarily saying, at airline, 1, I hate you. They're saying it to each other. They're saying, you won't believe what happened to me the other day. I got off in Dallas, the baggage wasn't there, and this is the 4th time this has happened to me. And it could well be that the airline doesn't even know about this. So those are the first areas. Second area is exactly all the areas you say, where people tell you, if you don't do something soon, I'm going to leave and I'm going to do something else, or why can't you do what your competitor does? Because I love you, but I just love it if you did this as well. Those are the things we're not looking at right now. Now, when we do combine those things, we have new opportunities to create better products and services, but we also have an opportunity to predict when things are going to change in the market. So one example was a supermarket chain, I won't mention the name, supermarket chain looking at social sentiment, and suddenly there's this enormous spike. And the enormous spike it's around 3 words. It's around plastics, Iceland, and this supermarket. And you're like, what's that? So you go and look at it. And what it was about was that David Attenborough, who's this British guy who does the Blue Planet, everybody's looked at it, had done an episode, and he talks about the danger of plastics to the well-being of the sea. And he'd mentioned a supermarket chain called Iceland that were trying to tackle this issue. And what people then suddenly did was they reached out to figure out what was happening to their supermarket. So all these people that weren't shopping at Iceland, what was happening at their supermarket? So this enormous spike. Now, when we went to talk to the supermarket executives, they basically said, we're not seeing that. Nobody's talking to us about this. Yeah. Okay, nobody's talking to you about this, but I can tell you when these social media tsunamis start to roll, they roll. So this was, 18, 24 months ago. Every single supermarket on the planet right now is trying to re-engineer its supply chain to take out plastic, to put in renewables, to take out packaging altogether. Now, you see that coming early on, either through the calls that you get or the sentiment. You've got a head start. you've got a head start. And obviously Iceland were doing a good job at the time, or else they wouldn't have got the favorable mention on there. So this is I have loads and loads of examples where just using the information you've already got access to can give you the ruthless truth about what you need to do to create better experiences for your employees and your customers.
So what do you tell executives who they already have 8,700 different things they're keeping track of, right? And now experience, XLAs. What's your advice to folks that they're just seeing a little blip on the radar with respect to this, but it's still not, they haven't had the supermarket experience that you just described.
Yeah. Well, some of them have had some pretty nasty scares, you know. So I think, first of all, when we talk to them, they understand this already, right? So I said 84% of CEOs already believe that creating a good experience is an important part of their success. Where they struggle is, but I'm already doing all these things. You know, I've got, I'm trying to do all these design thinking programs. I'm doing customer journeys. I'm investing in innovation labs, and I'm not getting enough out of it. So there's a frustration already. I think what we have to do is you look at this and say, okay, where's your frustration right now? Where's the biggest frustration? What is your opportunity to change that using what you've already got? Where's the resistance to doing that? Why wouldn't you do that? And then let's take this first step. And it could be a very small first step to prove a point. And then we start the programs from there. Generally, most executives, certainly the very senior executives, they already feel there's something wrong. They already feel the investments aren't paying off. And so they're really looking for, you know, I've done public cloud, I've got ServiceNow, I've got Salesforce, and I've done all these things. Why is the magic not happening? And what we're basically saying is, you've done all those things so that the magic now can happen. Magic's not going to happen for those things, but without those things, you're probably not going to be able to do the magic. Awesome. Now you've got them. Let's build on top of that, and we're going to do it through data around all the data you've got and the sentiment data that you may also be looking at, but in pockets rather than bringing it together to have a full view.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think that's a good point to wrap up. It's an optimist point because, yeah, you're right. You have executives and companies making these investments into cloud, digitizing, getting the newer platforms. And it's like, why is the experience still not changing? And now you need to do certain things that those platforms will help really leverage. So I know that we could spend hours on this subject, and I want to leave a little bit for the future to invite you back on. Why don't you tell our listeners and viewers, where could they look you up, something exciting you're working on now or in the next 6 months, so that they would say, I got to go see where Alan is and contact him?
Well, we're pushing very hard now on the awareness, right? So there's two big issues. First of all, the people in the middle who have to get this done are not ready yet. You know, they're in transition from the old way of thinking about service management and process management to experience management. So we need to help them accelerate that journey. But we've created two courses that we've launched. The first is the Essence of Experience that's launched in the US, and it's now launched in Europe. And that's really an awareness course. But we've also launched the Mastering XLA Framework course. That's just been launched in Europe. So those are really the education so that people can start to figure out for them what can they do in their organization, how can they lead the change. We want that to be a movement. In addition to that, we are actually engaging with customers right now to do things like reworking sourcing agreements to take us out of that adversarial 30 years of adversarial outsourcing and making a more collaborative dialogue in the sourcing relationship. That's something we're doing now. I think those are the two big things. And the third thing is we're actually creating a workbench to do experience design. And that maps back to what you just said, Pedro, that this technology is now reaching an abundance, but it's difficult if it's not configured together. There's a lot of very specialist stuff, very exciting stuff happening. We're bringing that together to one design workbench. So those are
So
the
Alan,
three big things.
that's awesome. Thank you. Where can they reach you? Where can they reach out to you? What's the website?
CitrusCollab. So it's CitrusCollab.com. That's the place to go to get the right information.
Excellent. Very good. Alan, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule and sharing your rich insights with us. Really appreciate it. And I definitely look forward to having you back on the show in the future.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And Pedro, it's great to be with somebody who already has all of the passion for experience. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.